President Biden has the most to lose. And the reason I say that is because we know what Donald Trump is going to be. There's a reason why we've put these rules in place. It's because of Donald Trump, because of what happened during the 2020 cycle, the muting of microphones and things like that. We know what he is. We don't know what President Biden's going to be.
Hey, everybody. Welcome into a special edition of the Can We Please Talk podcast. As always, I am Mike Leon.
And not having nowhere near a -6 handicap, I'm Nick Severi.
He didn't even say it right, folks. It's okay, folks. It's 0 to 30. Okay. And then you go in the plus direction for professional golfers. That's the way handicaps work. It's not that hard. All right. On the program today, let's just get right into it, Nick, because this is a special episode here. The debate just finished. I've gotten at least 40 text messages from people. Are you on TV tonight? I am not on TV. No Latino representation tonight on the CNN panel. More on that in just a second because I'm a little bit upset about that. But I am not on TV. Nick and I are doing a special episode tonight. We both purposely did the debate watch separate of each other, and we wrote down notes just like the candidates did. We decided to take a little old school, get a notepad, sit down there, watch this down. You see Nick showing his notes there on, if you're watching us on YouTube. And we decided to just write some notes down just like they were doing. So we're going to start like this, Nick, because we're going to play some of the exchanges. It was a little bit helter-skelter. Some answers wandered from both of them. One candidate didn't look like he was all there. We're going to get into that in a second. I just want high level first from you, and then I'll go. And keep this brief. What did you make of the night overall? Let's start there first. Just overall impressions on the hour and 40 minutes of this debate.
Yeah, I thought that, I think overall it went better than I had hoped. I thought the idea of muting candidates, essentially cutting off their microphone when it wasn't their turn to speak, this needs to be the standard going forward. I thought it was clean that way. I mean, at some point you could hear sort of the murmurs, when people had side comments after, but that was kept to a minimum. I thought overall the questions were good. I really don't like, there was at least twice that Dana used the well, people say ... And I was hoping for either candidate to say, could you verify this? When she asked about, black voters feel a certain way, can you tell me some? Do you have numbers that back that up? Because that really feels like you're using they in this case. Anyway, overall though, I thought the structure was great. I'm not going to give away the lead here, but yeah, one candidate needed a lozenge early and looked like he woke up from a nap. And the other one sounded good. I mean, for what he is, right? And I think that was the most telling thing. I kept writing on my notepad about that. So
I am in 1,000% agreement with everything you said. First, from a 30,000 foot overview, the structure was done correctly. This is the new format going forward, to be honest with you. It is two people, or it should be more people, to be honest with you. There are other people that are running for the highest office in the land. We're going to have some of those candidates on the program in the coming weeks, but it should be just like this. It should be 2 to 3 or 4, however many candidates will end up being for the September debate. Nobody in the studio, muting of microphones if necessary. I agree with you. It was clean. There was very seldom the interruptions. One of the fears that I had, that I was sharing as I was doing some of these media hits, was that they're going to get sidetracked conversationally. That didn't happen, which was good. That was the only good thing. The bad thing about this was that you had one current president of the United States that did not look all there. There was numerous times, we're going to play some of the exchanges, where he froze mid-sentence, pivoted to something else. It was off topic. At times, Dana said, okay, thank you, Mr. President. And he just wrapped himself and in mid-sentence. That does not look good on television. You're the historian here on this show. You know of the way the Nixon JFK debates and the TV aspect of this made Nixon look and ultimately gave JFK the presidency. I'm not saying that that's going to happen with Trump, because there's another debate coming up, But man, this did not look good for President Biden. For President Trump, I agree with you. It's the same thing. The same hits. You know what he's going to say. He's going to tell you that, the two folks that his administration killed are the two, baddest men ever on the planet. So he got them. He's going to tell you about the millions of people that are pouring in. And we have covered this on the show. There are not millions of people, illegals, that are pouring into this country. There is a crisis at the border. It's an administrative one because there's too many people there and we don't know how to deal with all of them because we don't have enough people working there to deal with all of them. We didn't get nuanced policy conversation. Of course not. Why would we? And the other guy, who's 3 years younger, kept regurgitating the same hits. And the only thing that he did, like you said, that was normal was he didn't veer. He didn't, try to crosstalk him, try to yell at him different things. He didn't really hit on the Hunter Biden thing. He did it like one time. I thought he was going to hit on that way more. So I don't know what to take away from that, but I think if I was advising President Biden, I wouldn't have agreed to this debate. And if I was advising President Trump, I mean, you basically did what you set out to do, which is why this format kind of suited him. So, all right, I want to now pivot from that. And we're going to play some of the exchanges because, again, Nick and I, following this along in real time, wrote down notes. So they started to break down in hierarching topics, economy, abortion, immigration, foreign policy, Trump trials, January 6th. They got the climate change stuff. They did a bunch there, but there was some wandering within all of them. So I want to play some of the exchanges here. And what you and I are going to do, Nick, is we're just going to react in real time to some of these things. And if this follows along with the notes that we made, it follows along. So here's the first exchange when it comes to economic, the economy overall, what Biden inherited and what Trump left them with. Take a listen to this.
The only thing he was right about is I gave you the largest tax cut in history. I also gave you the largest regulation cut in history. That's why we had all the jobs. And the jobs went down and then they bounced back. And he's taking credit for bounce back jobs. You can't do that. He also said he inherited 9% inflation. No, he inherited almost no inflation, and it stayed that way for 14 months. And then it blew up under his leadership because they spent money like a bunch of people that didn't know what they were doing, and they don't know what they were doing. It was the worst, probably the worst administration in history. There's never been. And as far as Afghanistan is concerned, I was getting out of Afghanistan, but we were getting out with dignity, with strength, with power. He got out. It was the most embarrassing day in the history of our country's life.
All right. So again, first thing, Joe Biden, and this is from CNN, the network that's covering this, okay? Joe Biden, I want to say a couple of weeks ago, Nick, falsely had claimed that the inflation rate was 9% when he began. You heard Trump there say that he said it was 9%, and it wasn't. It was not. When Biden took over in presidency, the year-over-year inflation rate in January of 2021, the month of his inauguration, was about 1.4%. The Biden era inflation rate did peak at about 9.1%, but that occurred in June of 2022. So almost 15 months later, after Biden had been president for more than 15 months. Okay. Currently, right now, well, as of a couple months ago, we're about at 3.2%, 3.3%. So Trump is right on that. I have to fact check things when there's right. This is according to CNN. This is the network that's fact checking it. So that was the first thing on the economic front. What did you write down or what notes did you take when the two of them were talking about the economy? Because you've alluded to the only thing the Trump administration has really done was those tax cuts and the tax cuts. And they always tend to think that that'll trickle back down economics wise because billionaires that get tax cuts will reinvest it into their workforce. That has never proven to be true, but they continue to do that, right? What did you write down from an economic standpoint, when they were going over this topic?
Some of the things that came to me were that Trump is right on that. That, I mean, those numbers, as you mentioned, are correct. There's always going to be a huge asterisk here, right? This is like Barry Bonds' home run record. Like, you can't ignore the asterisk, which in this case is COVID. At that point, you have a situation where, at that point, it is a lower rate of inflation. So you're looking at a peak. At the same time, we can look at, the constant moratorium essentially on student loan payments, and there were other efforts from the Biden administration to basically try to stave off people from paying back debt, which inevitably is going to cause this situation because you're basically going to have to continue those stimulus payments as well. But that seems kind of inevitable. Is that necessarily a bad statement on an economy? It's hard to say because you're in economic recovery, and that's not necessarily because of Trump's bad economic decision. It's really just the fact that you're dealing with COVID, and that's always going to make this a little more complicated. But yeah, the number, you can't deny the numbers of where he was.
No, it's true. On the economy stuff, I thought, again, this is what I wrote down notes wise. So again, Nick and I followed the kind of same procedure that they did in terms of writing down notes. Economy was at the top of the show. So both of the men came out and obviously, brief introduction, and then they started talking. Obviously, Biden blamed former President Trump, but he also, this is what I wrote down, Nick. So people can kind of hear the actual thought process of what I wrote down. Former President Biden, current President Biden, Jesus, Freudian slip there. President Biden blamed Trump and stammered through his first answer. Trump starts off praising himself as always, but did not answer the question. Trump wanders in the first few minutes of the rebuttal response, but didn't interrupt him. Biden said something that was a lie about troops not dying on his watch. This just shows you how they both started to wander from topic to topic, even though Jake and Dana asked a question about the economy. They didn't ask about the withdrawal in Afghanistan. They didn't ask about veterans, but somehow we ended up on that topic. And then I wrote down at the end, Trump is right about inflation. And obviously I just gave you the number from the fact check off of CNN. And then they wandered off course again into a discussion about immigration. We're going to get into some of it. I don't want to play every single thing from the debate because I do think that it was a little bit helter-skelter from the two of theirs perspective because they just kept wandering off. But I do want to go back to the economy stuff because during the economy segment is where President Biden had his lapse, where he had a momentary, all I wrote down was he malfunctioned. And I'm not trying to say this in a demeaning way to the leader of the free world. He had a moment where he just mid-sentence didn't know what he was saying and he stopped. And I've had that on live television before and I've had to recover. I'm also 41 years younger and, I was able to get through it. He's the leader of the free world. He can't have that moment on that stage. I want to play for you the exchange here, Nick, and then we're going to react on the other side. Take a listen.
Make sure that all those things we need to do, child care, elder care, making sure that we continue to strengthen our healthcare system, making sure that we're able to make every single solitary person eligible for what I've been able to do with the with the COVID. With dealing with everything we have to do with. Look, if we finally beat Medicare,
Nick, you and I, we're not in the process of, and again, you're the opinion commentator on the show and I'm the host. So we're not, you can endorse whoever you want, clearly, right? We can all do that. But we truly try to give this perspective of like what this is about and, giving you statistical data points and then discussing that as part of a larger argument, right? Like we just gave about the inflation stuff, right? Like it's not about whether or not you support Trump or not. It's about what were the numbers when Biden took over and what was the inflation rate at when it peaked. That's all it is. It's a numbers thing. Watching that, and the biggest thing that I had been mentioning recently in the lead up to all these previews about the debate was this CEO effect, right? The CEO of the United States, we're hiring for that person for the next 4 years. We're choosing between an 81-year-old and a 78-year-old. And there's other candidates out there that work at the company for, keeping with the analogy, but they're not really serious contenders to be the CEO unless something happens. That something was what took place on this debate stage tonight, in my opinion, because polling has shown no one wants to see the rematch, right? 60 or at least 2/3 of Americans don't want to see the rematch. My own co-host on this show said he was not happy with this rematch, as well as I have maintained some of that as well. Given the age and given things like that, where you can easily point to President Biden showing his age and then President Trump following it up with something like this with respect to abortion.
Again, the former governor of Virginia, put the baby down, then we decide what to do with it. So he's willing to, as we say, rip the baby out of the womb in the 9th month and kill the baby. Nobody wants that to happen, Democrat or Republican. Nobody wants it to happen.
You're lying. That is simply not true. The Roe v. Wade does not provide for that. That's not the circumstance. Only if a woman's life is in danger, she's going to die. That's the only circumstance in which that can happen. But we are not for late-term abortion, period. Period, period.
So that was probably one of the exchanges that semi-made sense, but then also you realize there is no such thing as a healthy baby, 9 months, coming out of the womb, and the doctor's like, you know what? Time to get rid of this. Or the mom's like, you know what? I think we should get rid of this. Those don't happen. It's not even, it's not real. It's not a real scenario. So again, that's being uttered by one candidate, and then the other one is freezing up. So now I want to ask you, economy issues wise, they started pivoting to abortion, but they were kind of all over the place. What did you write down next about when they got into the abortion issue and women's reproductive rights and Trump's answers about some of the judges that he's put on the court? What were some of your takeaways from that? Did you learn anything new, Nick, or was it all the same hits?
Yeah, it was the same hits. I thought that Dana's question is stupid. She mentioned 7 states that have no restrictions. And then she brings up, like, are you comfortable with a late-term abortion, essentially? And she's basically fed what a lot of anti-abortion people have put forward. It's a flawed question because this doesn't exist. And I thought the president did a good job of countering it. But again, he sounded dotty as he did. But Trump's attitude of, sending this to the states was the right decision. Now, people could decide that however they want, but that was a little odd.
A little odd indeed. I want to play a couple. Again, this is rapid reaction because Nick, you and I, we've not planned anything. We watched the debates separately. Some clips have been pulled. I want to get into some more from it. But again, the overall takeaways for me and you, and we're aligned about this, format great, candidates not so much. Let's take a listen to another exchange as now they started trickling into some other issues, right? I was hopeful that we would get a real clear discussion about the crisis at our U.S. southern border, Nick, and what to do about it and what administration plans to do about it. Senate bill, House bill, I don't care who's introducing it. Somebody write something that's comprehensive that deals with the actual crisis, the backlog of asylum cases, immigration judges, the lack of border patrol agents, or at least funding that department properly so they can hire more people. Instead, I got this.
You've said that you're going to carry out, quote, the largest domestic deportation operation in American history, unquote. Does that mean that you will deport every undocumented immigrant in America, including those who have jobs, including those whose spouses are citizens, and including those who have lived here for decades? And if so, how will you do it?
Just 1 second. He said we killed 3 people. The people we killed are al-Baghdadi and Soleimani, the 2 greatest terrorists, biggest terrorists anywhere in the world. And it had a huge impact on everything, not just border, on everything. He's the one that killed people with the bad water, including hundreds of thousands of people dying and also killing our citizens when they come in. We are living right now in a rat's nest. They're killing our people in New York, in California, in every state in the union because we don't have borders anymore. Every state is now a border. And because of his ridiculous, insane, and very stupid policies, people are coming in and they're killing our citizens.
So, Nick, like I said, nuanced policy discussion on how we solve the crisis at our U.S. southern border. And I got that riffraff. What could you have possibly, and this is why I wanted to do this, because this is raw emotion right after it happened. We've covered the other GOP presidential debates. And even those with 5, 6, 7 people, we were able to at least dive into a little bit with numbers, with fact checking, with, some policy discussion, but here you got more of that. How am I supposed to discern if I'm truly an independent voter? How am I supposed to discern between the guy who froze up and the other guy who just rambled, gave you thousands, then gave you hundreds of millions? I don't know what he's talking about numbers wise. How would you advise a truly independent, undecided voter to discern between these two, given the clips that we've been playing so far from this debate?
I mean, probably the first thing I would say is that, if you're really concerned about, is there an uptick in crime because you have a larger community of migrants coming in, it's very easy to actually find it out. I mean, there's data we can find that even breaks down demographically who's committing these crimes. So flat out, what the former president said is a lie, and it traffics in racism. You come back to this idea of, we're letting people out of insane asylums. It keeps coming back to that. We're getting the quote unquote worst of the bunch. They are coming from Central South America and from Mexico, and that's simply not the case. But Biden could have called it racism, and he never did.
I want to play one more final exchange here because, like I said, these topics, and I wrote it out because I didn't have a handle of what they would be asking about. I was at the CNN studios this week. Nobody really knew the way the hierarchy of the questions would go outside of Dana, Jake, and their producers. So they moved from economy to abortion to immigration, foreign policy, which they started to talk about with Russia's aggression. Trump gave the same answers about that Biden caused this because Putin saw the Afghanistan withdrawal. This would have never happened under his watch. Israel, Gaza answers were all over the place. No one talking about the human suffering that's happening in Gaza right now, the strategy to get back the hostages. Biden said that apparently the United Nations, Qatar, and some of the other countries have agreed to this potential ceasefire plan, but that Hamas has not agreed to it. Again, some of that is true. It's just not a clear, defined solution. If you're a parent of one of the hostages, you're like, am I ever going to get to see my family member again? And then if you're a Palestinian and you have family in Gaza, will you be able to ever see your family again if they're still alive? So nobody gave a true answer on that. I mentioned they covered the Trump trials and some climate change stuff. Trump saying that he's the best climate change president of all time, which we know that some of those things and some of the emissions rollbacks, who he put in charge of the EPA, some of those things are not true. I don't have time here to fact check him because I wanted to react to one thing that I had been mentioning, which was the framing of these questions. We have to do better. We have to do better with how we frame questions to politicians. The one thing that Nick and I pride ourselves on is the way we ask a certain question. A lot of the times, and Nick and I'll speak for Nick here, we look for that. That's a good question. And then they give an answer. Because when somebody says that's a good question, it means that you did the research to be able to know how to frame this the proper way that they are going to elicit a better response than just a normal question. Think of like when an athlete wins a championship and somebody goes up to the athlete and goes, "How do you feel?" That's one of the stupidest questions of all time. He's crying on his face. You know how he feels. He's overcome with emotion. There's no reason to ask that. That is one of the dumbest questions of all time because it's a layup of a question. So one of the things that I was very vocal about was how Dana and Jake framed these questions. And of course, I said on TV, please don't ask the stupid question of will he accept the results of the 2024 election. He hasn't accepted the 2020. The 2016 one, he barely accepted. He said he won by more, if you recall. Stop asking a question to somebody that already has exhibited that he, A, will not accept it, but B, knows it's not rigged. And you know how I know it's not rigged? Because again, to stress this to people, if Nick and I played in a poker game and Nick rigged it and stole money from me, I would not play in that poker game again and again. This is the third time the former president of the United States is running for the highest office in the land. You don't go participate in something that's rigged and stolen against you 3 separate times, Nick. You don't go do it. But he got asked a dumb question. And of course, on the January 6th stuff, he got asked a dumb question about all of this with the January 6th. He gave the Nancy Pelosi answer. I want to play some of that because that kind of obviously ties into January 6th was all about, a protest that was around the election being stolen, which we know it wasn't stolen. And it ended up, halting for a little bit the certification of the election results. So I want to play for you a little bit of what he said in response and the way the question was asked.
My question was, what do you say to those voters who believe that you violated your constitutional oath through your actions and inaction on January 6, 2021, and worry that you'll do it again?
Well, I didn't say that to anybody. I said peacefully and patriotically. And Nancy Pelosi, if you just watched the news from 2 days ago, on tape to her daughter, who's a documentary filmmaker, they say, but she's saying, oh, no, it's my responsibility. I was responsible for this. Because I offered her 10,000 soldiers or National Guard, and she turned them down. And the mayor in writing, by the way, the mayor in writing turned it down, the mayor of D.C. They turned it down. I offered 10,000 because I could see, I had virtually nothing to do. They asked me to go make a speech. I could see what was happening. Everybody was saying they're going to be there on January 6th. They're going to be there. And I said, you know what? There's a lot of people coming. You could feel it. You could feel it, too, and you could feel it. And I said, they ought to have some National Guard or whatever. And I offered it to her. And she now admits that she turned it down.
That goes on for like another minute before Jake pivots to another question, which is, again, another part of this moderator scenario. And I got some text on the moderator front as well, because obviously I happen to know both Jake and Dana, and Nick knows Jake as well. Moderators have tough jobs. It's, you gotta let that person respond. You gotta semi-listen to them, maybe correct them, but you also have to give the other person a chance to respond. It's called a moderator for a reason, right? You got to figure out how to moderate the conversation and shift from topic to topic. But sometimes you get answers like that, and you can't fact check it in real time like we're able to do right now, which is the claim that Nancy Pelosi was in charge of the Capitol Police on January 6th is false. This is based on an independent report from the USA Today. While the House Speaker has some ties to Capitol Police oversight, saying that Pelosi is in charge, in air quotes, of the agency isn't accurate. The agency is overseen by a 3-member board, none of whom are appointed by the Speaker of the House. That was according to the USA Today, a fact check on that. Nick, as we put a bow on this, and you can answer about the January 6th stuff, framing up questions, whatever direction you want to go in here, I want to pose this to you. We watch this now. I truly felt maybe we would see 2 different versions of these people. I don't know why I thought that, because I'm an idiot, maybe. And I watched it, and Biden looked worse. As you heard in the beginning of the show, I said he has the most to lose, because I already know what Donald Trump is. I already know. I can regurgitate what he would say from issue to issue, because I've watched his campaign rallies. I've seen his interviews. He even mentioned this is the way he prepared for interviews. He's an off-the-cuff type of guy. He can just ramble and wander, and that makes sense to his base, right? Will it bring in any new voters? I don't know. But President Biden could lose people by showing a performance like this, where he struggles at times, transitionally, segues, forgets certain things. Even though his policies may be benefiting people more, this is him on a national stage, and it shows that, man, can I trust that guy for another 4 years? I don't know if I'd give him 4 more months. So what says you? I want you to put a bow on this because, again, we're going to have another one of these in September. We got the conventions coming up in July and August. I think Republicans, we know how they're going to spin this about, well, not spin it. I mean, it's on tape, how they're going to talk about President Biden and how he reacted. Democrats, I don't know how you spin it. I just saw a tweet from Joy Reid saying that, Biden did the opposite of what he went to accomplish tonight. I just got that sent today. As we're recording this, CNN has a lower graphic that says from a Democratic operative, it's hard to argue that Biden should be our nominee. That's on the Democratic side. So put a bow on this. Overall, not only the takeaways of the night, but where do we go from here? Do you think this race got affected at all after tonight?
I don't know if it was affected. I think people who were going to vote the way they were going to vote are going to, that's still going to continue. But I think that similar to the tweet you just shared, I'm reading some stuff on my phone here, stuff from Mehdi Hassan and folks. Yeah, I think this now opened the nightmare scenario that there was probably some voice in the room that said Joe probably shouldn't go for a second term, and I think that just got solidified tonight because that was the biggest takeaway for me. I think policy-wise, they said exactly the things I thought they would say, and I think they rambled in the same spaces I thought they would. But it became clear today that Biden going into 86, as was shared by Dana in that question, he sounded like he's going to be 82. And let me be clear on this. I've known many people in my work where I've talked to people, senior citizens. Like it's not a given that because a person's in their 80s, they don't sound coherent. Like I'm not saying that. I'm not an ageist. But I will tell you that what I heard today was a person who just sounded ill-equipped to be a leader, especially of a country. But he's going up against someone who is such a pathological liar that there were moments today that things I heard from the former president made sense. And as listeners, where I stand on this. But as I heard it, I said, yeah, I can understand Trump's point there. The problem is his track record of being a truthful person is so abysmal that I truly can't take anything he says seriously. Even that exchange of 19 people in the room did not hear him say that, some of these soldiers are suckers, but the one general who did quote that and then is no longer, part of Trump's team, was fired because he's incompetent, not that he told the truth, I guess. These are the silly things that am I prepared to deal with, or as Americans, that we want to deal with 4 years. And folks, I'll let you in on a little secret about how we look at American presidents. We look for the strongest one in the room and never fails. You look at, Mike mentioned Nixon and Kennedy. One person sounded young and confident. The other person sounded dotty. You look at, I think about Mondale and Reagan, which I think is 884. Same thing. Ronald Reagan was into his 80s when he, as president, but just sounded so much more confident with where he was. This is a problem. I saw a tweet, and I think this best sums it up, that what may be helping Biden to decide to step away, potentially, is that truly the leaders of the party, Clinton, Obama, Schumer, Pelosi, sit that man down and say this ain't it. But on the other side, I thought Trump did exactly what I thought he would do, and I think he did it better.
I kind of want to add to that, but you really landed the plane really well there. This was a long flight, and I was like, wait a minute. And then you landed the plane there perfectly. We leave it there. Again, let us know what you think about the debate. Email us, canwepleasetalkpodcast@gmail.com. We'll be back next week with regular episodes. We've got some great guests lined up in the coming weeks, including, like I mentioned, some of those presidential candidates that are in other parties that are going to be running for the highest office in the land. They're going to be coming on the program. So stay tuned for those episodes. As always, you want to check out the video portions of any of our interviews, any of the show clips, any of the times Nick and I have done television hits. Head over to Can We Please Talk Podcast on YouTube. Hit subscribe for me while you're there. Thank you for listening to us always across all these audio podcast platforms. We can't do it without each and every one of you that listens in. As always, I'm Mike Leon.
And I'm Nick Saveri.
We'll see everybody next time.